Hey Blaine,
Hello, Mark.
how are you, sir?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
I can. I'm
Good.
I'm, I'm assuming that's a real fish tank behind you.
That's, I'm on so many Zoom calls these days that I'm actually learning all the tricks, So today it was an aquarium. Yesterday it was Golden Gate Bridge.
Oh my gosh, well, good for you. That actually looks real. So early in the process of COVID, I actually bought a green screen, not realizing that Zoom actually had, similar effects. However, the green screen does a much better job.
Well,
So
that's exactly what this is. It was funny when I went to buy my green screen 3 weeks ago, they were sold out all over the place.
I would imagine,
And so
yeah.
I found one that I really liked because of how easy it was to use. It literally is in a tube, and you open the tube and just pull it up, and then when you're done, you push it back down and put it away. And so they sent it to me, and I've had kind of fun. There's websites that have these backgrounds that you can buy and download and all those things.
Right.
So when I go to I have, you know, we're not going to be video today, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know what I'll put on. I'll do whatever you'd like. Most of mine are audio clips,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
I've got about 200 to 300. I don't know. I just call them people that I stay connected with or mentor with.
Yeah.
That I kind of shoot out the nuggets to, and
Yeah.
I've certainly done quite a bit of telling people about. It's pretty rare that I read a book, especially in our industry, and that's one of the questions I'd kind of pass along to you. But one of my favorite books. So one of my clients and mentors in 2018 said his goal was to read a book a week. And he was just on like this massive growth path. And it
Yeah.
was funny because I tried the same thing, but I only got through, I think I did 26 books. And in that year, it was really fun. I mean, one of my favorite books was Deep Work by Cal Newport. And I say that on the podcast that I'm on because it really is the opposite of what we're taught in sort of modern times. You're taught to go to work, push paper, do what you can. But really that deep work is where where the value is and what you get paid for. And I don't want to go too much into it, but I read your book and I could tell you've been in the business forever. And sorry, I'll kind of back up and we'll kind of sort of re-intro and get us going here. But I just was really grateful as a commercial real estate agent that somebody in your capacity and your experience took the time, to put pen to paper in an industry that, you train your competition.
Yeah.
I just was really personally grateful that you'd put that kind of time into it. And it was very action oriented. It wasn't like, here's some information, do with it what you want. It's here's some information and here's what you can do with it and what it means to you and your industry and your space. So, first off, thank you so much for taking that kind of time. And it's been great to get to know you a little bit further past that. But what a great book. So thank you.
Well, thank you for those comments. One quick comment that you might just want to take into consideration, given that you're such a voracious reader. Many years ago, I became an adjunct professor. So imagine yourself showing up at a university, let's say once a week, and teaching a class of hungry, students. So what would happen is students would come up to me and go, "Hey, man, I love real estate. I want to get into real estate. What should I read?" And so I would always sit there and stammer and say, "Well, you could do this, you could do that, whatever." But here's a little trick that I learned that might be valuable for you. Are you part of Goodreads, or do you know what Goodreads is?
I don't.
It used to be called Shelfari. It's now called Goodreads. Amazon bought Shelfari and turned it into Goodreads. So what you can do is, it's free. You go to goodreads.com, you log in, you get your free account, and then you link to me as a friend. And when you link to me as a friend, you can see my shelf. And so here's what I've learned to do. Every time I read a book, you go to Goodreads, you look it up, the book appears, and it gives you three choices: want to read, reading, or read. So I click on read, and I do about a 4-sentence review. You give it stars, you give it a 4-sentence review. And what I've learned to do is not give a review that would go on the New York Times. It would say something like, "I read this book because Mark told me to read it. I read it on my Kindle. It took me 4 days. I found it to be very compelling. Here's my primary takeaways, and I would recommend it to other people who would like who like this or are looking for that." So it's very tailored to my audience. So here's my point: is students would come up to me and I would say, "I don't answer that question anymore. Go to Goodreads, friend me, so you can look at my shelf. There's 190 books on that shelf now."
Wow.
So here's what I'm telling you: imagine that you were posting 20 books a year. then what happens is you can build friends. And so it's an easy way to keep it all organized. Like if you become my friend and I post a review of something I'm reading, you get a push notice. Blaine just read this book. Here's what he thought of it. But for you, given your age and stage, you could end up with 300 or 400 books in your library by your time, my age. And then when people ask you, what I would tell students is befriend me and then look at my shelf and you pick 3 books and ask me, do I think those would be good for you? So instead of me making a recommendation, they pick out 3 books. And I read across a wide spectrum.
Yeah.
I mean, there's gardening books and religious books and fiction books. And, you know, I listen to a lot of books on audiobooks sometimes just to hear the narrator. In other words,
Yeah.
I have a lot of interest in that arena.
No, it's awesome. I wouldn't say it's a game changer for me because most of what I've read has been business oriented. I mean, I'm in that stage in my career where I'm trying to figure out, you know, how to really drive the real value, not like, oh, this guy needs a deal, here's a deal, put a deal together, but really understanding what drives real estate in general, what trends and opportunities are we seeing? I mean, I do a lot I'd say my side hustle is development. I've done a lot of infill redevelopment for townhomes and what, you know, the missing middle product and getting into some bigger projects. And I don't know, I've done kind of everything, but I have started to move more towards reading some of the, you know, classic Greeks and Stoicism and, you know, working more towards religion and things to broaden my mind. So, I mean, as far as business goes, I'm pretty dialed in that place, but I'm excited to look forward to expanding that. So I really appreciate the Goodreads. I'll go check that out. I mean, it's funny, LinkedIn has been my Goodreads, but it's all business related, right? It's like somebody will make a recommendation, I'll read it. There's Keith Wasserman's become a friend of mine and he recommended this Zeckendorf. So I'm going to read that one next. I probably have too many books to get through in the next couple of weeks, but
well,
anyway, I will definitely check that out.
Yeah, I mean, we could go on and on about this, obviously, but one of the things I would say is that I don't remember if I put it in, I think it is an adapt where I tell you about the discussion that I had with the business school dean, where he says, well, I don't even think we should be teaching real estate.
Right. It is in the book.
And so the idea of what you're doing is you're doing exactly what I did. Is I became an expert at real estate by the time I was 23 years old. And now I'm reading Gone with the Wind and you know, and Treasure Island and the Count of Monte Cristo, because I'm trying to become a Renaissance man backwards, you know. But so I think you and I are on the same path there, which is I personally think that's how you make sure that you remain relevant and interesting is, you know, read the great books.
Yeah, well, you're right. And I would say that reading has been probably one of the best things for my business.
Yeah. Because
it does challenge you and it keeps you top of mind and relevant and on trend and the things that are important to your industry. So yeah, I have loved my reading journey, but I do think, and I don't want to go off topic because we do have kind of a list to go through, but real estate, right? Like I graduated in 2003 from the University of Utah. There were no real estate classes at the time. Now it's like they've got real estate, you know, you can graduate with a real estate degree, you can get your real estate license in college. Now they've got a pretty large MRED program at the University of Utah, which is pumping out developer after developer after developer. And that's a total side discussion because the joke is that everybody comes out of there and tries to put stuff under contract and then sell it to the real developers. But, you know, real estate is an interesting educational front, but I didn't get an education. You know, you and I, well, you had mentors, you had your fathers and grandfathers in the business, but I was handed now I sound like an old guy. I was handed a phone book and a phone and basically said, told to go figure it out. So, which I am grateful for because it's what's kept me alive and kept me relevant and kept me constantly adapting. 2009 and 10, when everyone else had their worst years, I had my best year because I was early to understanding where to go get the product. I ended up handling the majority of the FDIC disposition in Utah. Ended up selling something like, 114 assets through 9 different states and just had, monster years. It was great. But in our business, it doesn't matter how smart you are or what degree you get, you got to go to work and stay relevant and figure out where those trends and opportunities are going and why you should be in that space. So anyway, again, super glad to have you on and have these discussions because as we sort of, in our initial banter, we're talking about, with your experience and not only transaction volume, but coming from generations of commercial real estate brokers and investors and developers, you just bring such a great perspective. And I think that's so relevant right now. I've gotten a couple of calls the last couple of weeks from young brokers in Dallas and New York and whatever, basically saying I started at the wrong time. And my answer to that is absolutely not. You started at the best time. You know, it's the all-time equalizer when the markets freeze and everybody's scared and there's now opportunity and things to work through. But enough about me and the things I want to talk about. I'll just kind of start out by saying, Blaine, I read your book, Adapt. As a commercial real estate broker active in the space, was just grateful for the time that you had taken to put that together. It's rare to see people in your capacity providing that information and intelligence to younger brokers, you know, and mid-career brokers coming up. You're a 40-year veteran of the commercial real estate industry. You've held leadership positions in national companies you started yourself. You worked as a producer, manager, broker, consultant, coach, instructor. You've raised money for projects through both debt and equity sources. Your vast experiences, along with your thirst to learn, as we've talked about, enable you to bring a broad perspective of the issues that you address. You live in Orlando. You're a CCIM instructor since 2007. And just super grateful to have you on my podcast today. And thank you for jumping on.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. You remember that I think I found you really, which is that I saw a post on LinkedIn about reading and learning, and I contacted you. So I think we might be birds of a feather, and it's great to be with you today.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. I mean, obviously, the challenge with these discussions with professional to professional is I want to pick your brain for real-time active engagements, but you know, I want to sort of respect, you know, one, your time, but two, the fact that you have taken so much time to write the book Adapt, and that's coming off the heels of Thrive, which full disclosure, I have not read. However, two team members that I work with have now read both Thrive and Adapt, because I do think that Thrive is available on Kindle. I don't know if you have an audiobook out.
Yeah, both books are hardcover, Kindle, and audiobook.
Okay, awesome. So I think Darren, who I work with, did listen to Thrive, and he said I have to read that. So I'll have you touch on Thrive, but I want to start by just hearing a little bit about you. You know, I'd love to know a little bit about your experience in commercial real estate. You come from 3 generations of commercial real estate. You know, what have been your focuses and passions, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I'm actually the middle generation. My father was a fighter pilot in Vietnam. He's a West Point grad, and in those days you could end up in the Air Force coming out of West Point. Was a fighter pilot in Vietnam, and at age 44, retired from the Air Force. We were based at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, and he's like, "Hey, what's wrong with this picture? I'm in Central Florida. The war, you know, wore me out. I don't really, that's not my path anymore." So at sort of 44, 45 years old, he got a real estate license, and then quickly discovered that he wanted to be in commercial real estate. And right about that time, I was in college and realized, wow, I guess we're not going to live on Air Force bases for the rest of our lives, which is a kind of a cocoon type of existence, a very positive existence in my opinion. But I transferred to the University of Florida as a junior because in those days it was one of the few places that had a full real estate department. They had 6
Wow.
professors, and it was kind of like, okay, I guess I'm going to go in real estate. And so it really wasn't much more than that, but I got into the school. They had a great program. I ended up with working summers for an appraiser who was a great mentor. He persuaded me that you have to get a master's degree, you know, more education is the right thing to do. So, you know, I just followed that instruction, stayed another year and a half. The master's degree programs back in those days were not very highly evolved. And so the way you got a master's degree back then was they took the PhD program and knocked a couple classes out of it. So I actually wrote a thesis. I had to present,
Wow.
I had to defend a thesis. And so, but by age 24, you know, I had undergraduate and graduate degrees. I had salesman, and that had become a broker's license. I had some appraisal classes for a certification, because in those days, that's what you were expected to do, was go into appraisal. It was the only honorable thing to do.
Yes.
But all of a sudden, CBRE came to town, and I was one of the very first salespeople hired by CBRE. So January 1, 1982, it's me and 5 other people in a big office, cubes, the rotary phones sitting on the top of the white pages and the yellow pages, a yellow pad and 2 pencils, and welcome to CBRE.
Awesome.
So, many years later, my son, who is now 29, graduated from the University of Central Florida here in Orlando. He was not focused on real estate, flopped around in a couple of, let's say, entrepreneurial adventures, and then decided to come into real estate. And I said, great. And I didn't push him in that direction. He had maybe 4 jobs in 4 years, and then kind of found a home and got his own CCIM designation when he was 27 years old. So my father decided as if he was going to move into it, then he was going to try to figure out how to get to the top of the stack. And so he got his designation in 1984. I began to see that. I got into the business myself really at CBRE 1982. So my dad 84, me 87, and then 2018 for my son. So the 3 generations now are 29 years old, 63 years old, and 87 years old.
So
and
Thanksgiving, you guys just get deal. You just do deals.
We really have not done too many deals together, but of course we talk about it. I mean, we're all in the same circus, but we're in different parts of the arena. And of course, my dad's not really active anymore, but he's in good health, and
Awesome.
So it's kind of, it's obviously fun to have this heritage together.
Well, and you've certainly, as you discuss and adapt, you've certainly learned a lot and provide a lot of data, or sorry, not data, but information as far as like, a lot of the book is about how different generations are attacking these industries, and, what kind of value you can provide and what kind of career paths are ahead of them. So what, one of the things I'm very grateful for and absolutely understand, we talked about my favorite book a couple years ago was Deep Work, because you obviously took a lot of time to write both Thrive and Adapt. So what was your motivation and passion or goal of writing those books?
Well, so when I joined CBRE, in those days, in a typical CBRE office, there were 2 managers. There was a profit center manager, and his title was resident manager. And then there was a sales manager whose job it was to find, recruit, train, and retain. And so there was a full non-producing salaried manager who didn't have to run the profit center and think about, all 52 people, really was very focused in. And so I benefited from that as a salesperson. And then they came to me and said, listen, we only hire from within. We think you have the chops to be a sales manager, but you got to make a decision to leave production. That's the way we do it. Well, why would I do that? Well, that's because you can then become the number 1 guy, the profit center manager, and then you get a salary plus a share of the profits that you produce. But it's a pretty significant fork in the road.
Yes.
But as a young person, I spent a lot of time. I mean, before I was 30, I was a resident manager. So I had responsibility for finding the right people and hiring and retaining those people.
Wow.
CB had a lot of assets in those days. They had training programs. You sent your salespeople off to charm school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So then what happened, Mark, is that when we got to the end of the 80s and there was the RTC crisis, which meant that all of these loans that had been made by the savings and loan industry were effectively taken back en masse by a government organization called the Resolution Trust Company. So sort of like what you see right now, sort of a not, but for 3 years, there were no deals done. And it was because you would call the RTC and say, look, I got a guy who wants to buy that property. He will pay the appraised value. And the answer was, we hear that, we appreciate that. We have no idea where the deed is. I mean, the deed is in a warehouse in Little Rock. I mean, so the problem was, it was a lack of technology. I mean, you have to remember, in those days, there wasn't much technology. So in order to survive with no revenue, the firms cut back on all of their overhead, and the sales manager, as you can imagine, was the first to go. When they came out of that in 1992, they look around and they say, well, look at that, Mark is still in business. Let's go get Mark to leave that firm and come to our firm. And so the way they competed in those days was on split. So Mark, come over here and we'll give you a 70% split. And the theory was in those days that since the guy survived, he probably doesn't need that much coaching anyway. He's already got it kind of figured out. And so since the early 90s, the model has been, a split-oriented model, which means that there aren't very many resources from a training perspective. Really, it becomes your responsibility to do that. So the reason I wrote Thrive is, the final sentence of the introduction to Thrive is, I explain why this is needed. And then my last sentence is, so let me be your sales manager. And the idea is that the 10 chapters that I then present are remedies to the challenges that you're going to face as you begin to accelerate. So a lot of people don't necessarily understand that Thrive does not tell you how to get into the business or whether you should get into the business. What it assumes is that you're in the business and you're trying to make progress, but you really don't have a sales manager or a mentor. You're not quite sure how to do that. You know you need an assistant, but you have no idea really how to do that. You know you need a deal tracking system, but you don't have one. And so that's why Thrive came to be, and so it's a very much oriented toward how to accelerate today. But about the time that book was published, I began to think about, I don't know whether it's because of things people said to me or just as I got older, but I began to feel that, it's not going to be this way forever. Or to be completely blunt, Thrive is going to be valuable for a short period of time because these tactics that I'm suggesting are actually 20, 30 years old. In other words, they're kind of historic guidance.
Yeah.
But what about tomorrow? And with that, I began to think about what the future of the industry would look like. Unlike Thrive, which I dictated into a speech recognition program in 3 days because it all came out of my own experience. I spent 2 years going to conferences, interviewing people, hiring researchers, holding focus groups. So it took me 2 years to write Adapt because it was a totally different kind of book. I had to think of, like, do I think this might cause change, and how would I get my hands around the throat of that sucker? I mean, what does Amazon really mean to us? What does it really mean when the average age is 60 years old? You can opine, but I wanted to try to get in a little bit tighter. And so Adapt was a different kind of book. And then shockingly, it came out on March 18th, which was sort of go day for COVID. And which is sort of a complete, it's a complete coincidence.
That was my next question. I mean, were you sort of feeling, it sounds like you've been working on it for 2 years. So, we talked earlier about most of my development deals I stopped putting together in 2016 because I felt it was late cycle. I started in 04, went through 8, 9, and 10, 11, and 12, and 13, 14, 15. It feels like I didn't think we were out of the cycle till 16 or 17. But did you anticipate or feel a black swan event coming, or?
Well, two or three quick comments about that. You remember in 2016, you would raise your hand at the trade association meeting and you'd ask the economist, hey, what inning are we in?
Right.
And they would go, I don't know, but it's got to be late in the game. And by 2018, they're like, I'm not answering that question anymore. Right. We're so far past ninth inning. Yes. And so, in some ways, you could make the case that I didn't know, nobody knew it was going to be a pandemic, but come on, Mark, we were so pregnant that we knew a downturn was out there. And those of us who've been through it before had girded ourselves for that. We knew that things would change. It cannot run forever. Yeah. We had the Great Recession, but then we had the Great Recovery. What a great long recovery. So Absolutely. Generally, I would say, look, we knew that some kind of downturn was coming. We didn't know that this would be it, but remember that what I say in Adapt, and it's important to kind of realize this, is that I specifically say in the introduction that I'm not going to talk about recessions or even technology, not pandemics, because those affect all of us globally. I think that there are forces inside our arena that are going to cause disruption. And For so sure. It's a coincidence that I wrote a book with this title called Disruption at the world's greatest day of disruption. But and I think what you are seeing, what many people are telling me is, Blaine, as I read your book, I believe that the COVID pandemic is actually accelerating some of the things that you propose, which again, in other words, outside forces are heating up change inside the arena, change that might have occurred in 10 years, might occur in 3 years because of the outside temperature.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the questions I was going to ask you, is just, how much has COVID accelerated that? I just look at my own clientele. My favorite meme is that Instagram post that shows the Scooby-Doo. I couldn't think of the cartoon, but it shows Scooby-Doo. It's like, who's behind this? And it shows Zoom, and it's like how many people have had to adapt to technology and make some pretty quick movements. But I've also recognized a lot of my clients and people in our industry have had time they haven't had. I haven't lit up my podcast in 4 or 5 years because we've been super busy, So I'm kind of excited. I think the things in your book are absolutely on trend and on point, and they will definitely affect it and affect our industry moving forward. I was just trying to think where to go from here, because one of my bigger concerns in the book is, obviously I get this question all the time: is commercial real estate going to be disrupted like Zillow has disrupted residential or homey or things of that nature? Because I'm in the business and because I adapt, I have very little qualms or fears. If I end up getting kicked out of brokerage, I'll go on the equity side. I mean, there's always stuff to do, so I definitely don't have those fears. But you do talk about some overarching things that are scary for the general growth and sustainability of our economy. And one of those is the chapter where you talk about sort of the population and the skills gap. And then you recommend reading the book When the Boomers Bail, which I have right here.
Yeah.
Boomers Bail. So, what is kind of your biggest, I guess, what would be one of the biggest fears that you have moving forward, or biggest trends or things that you're watching out for, concerned about, and that may also be opportunity?
Well, when I address this topic in the book, what I say, the subtitle of that chapter is, will we be the agents of our own destruction, of our own disruption? In other words, could Amazon change the world? Could CBRE change the world? Could transparency change our world? Yeah, and I explore all those subjects. But isn't it interesting that all these groups have surveyed our demographic cohort and said the average commercial real estate broker is 60 years old? And I would just give you this to think about, Mark. Just imagine that I asked you to go out and put 100 people in an arena or in an auditorium, and just after you get them in there, Mark, just go ahead and survey them and and tell me what their average age is, just so I'll kind of know how to address them. And then you go, well, I did that, Blaine, and they're 60 years old. And I go, what did you do? Rate a senior housing facility? I mean, how did you get the average age to be 60 years old?
Yeah.
Well, the flip side of that is that if you were to go to the big conferences like I did, you would see that half of the program is dedicated to the global learning leader at CBRE or the head of HR for Cushman & Wakefield. And
Right.
Guess what they're talking about? The really incredibly poor job we've done of bringing the next generation in. And so as a result, I make the case in the book for young people as an example. Many people get degrees in real estate, and almost none of them choose to become brokers with that background.
Right.
So it's not like we are not an important arena. It's just that we're not drawing them very effectively into the brokerage ranks. Of course, many of the sort of the other issues that are related to that is that if you look at that population, you'll not only will you see age, but you'll see an incredible lack of diversity. And so as a result, it's kind of not all that attractive in some ways to enter the arena. There's not really well honed orientation and onboarding programs. You cannot guarantee the success of the people that are coming on. I mean, you told me just before we started that your onboarding program was, here's the phone, good luck. Well, that's not much of a value proposition to really the best and brightest, because they're like, really? Because I could go to work for Procter & Gamble and they're going to teach me this, or I could go to work for Citibank and they're going to teach me this, or I could go to work for Morgan Stanley and they're going to teach me this, and they don't even expect me to make any money for 2 years. And you're basically like, yeah, we're going to pay you draw of $1,000 a month, but don't forget you have to pay that back. And so
I got $300 for 90 days in 2004.
Yeah. Now, 10 years ago, I heard Mark Lotman speak, and Mark made the comment that, regardless of anything else, you just simply have to say that there's this baby boomer generation, which has been unbelievably productive, but they're just going to gradually move out of the program. And the challenge that Mark points out is it's not that we haven't had population growth, although almost all that growth is due to immigration. So in other words, the birth rate in the United States is about flat. But if you continue to have people immigrate, which America is a country of immigrants, that's true. But what's happening is that you're going to take this big body of people with this set of skills and replace them numerically with an equal number or more people, but not the same skills.
Yeah.
And so what he's really talking about is when those people get on the bus and head out to the retirement center, the skills aren't going to be there. And we are like the white lab rat test case for that.
Yeah, which scares me. And our industry is tough. I mean, people call me because I'm on social media and they say, I want to become you. And it's like, you don't want to become me. Because if I wrote out what it took me to get here, you wouldn't do it. I didn't get paid for 14 months. My wife, who I love and adore, was my sugar mama. I wouldn't be in the business if she didn't support me. During 2008 and 9, I went to the company I worked for at the time and asked if they would, give me a loan, give me some money to get through it. And they said, and I quote, "Mark, if we give you money, we have to give everyone else money." I later found out that they did give top producers money. They just didn't want to reinvest in me. So, it is a tough industry and it's a tough sell. In my market, it was interesting because, like you said, it was okay. And when you started out to be an appraiser, I feel like brokerage in California is almost looked at more respectfully than even in our market. People think they joke that I'm a realtor, and it's like, no, they're held to a much higher moral standard than I am. But no one said, here's your lane, here's what you're going to do. And you're absolutely right. But again, that's why I was so excited to read your book and excited to promote Thrive and read Thrive. Is there's no training in this industry, but it is the best. I'm a stockbroker of physical assets. I know what everything is worth and why. I know where everyone's going and why they're going there and what it means to them. I think you were the one that called it, space as a service, right? The new SaaS. Real estate is everything, and it's so beautiful. I also tell people that I'm the world's biggest hedge fund manager, but I have no money and no assets because I have to figure out where those moves are going to be. And anyway, it will be interesting to see if we can try to turn that tide. I think brokerage is a fantastic opportunity for people. I just don't know where and how to do that. CB did it. Sounds like in the early 80s.
There's a couple of implications that are looming, I would say. On one hand, you could say, well, it really would be hard to feel strongly that the industry is going to stay like it is because this group of older people is going to move out. The people that have come up underneath have had to kind of find their own way. So you're not particularly good as a mentor. In other words, if the best thing you can do is like, well, that's how I did it, kind of like,
yeah.
I walked uphill to school both ways. Well, that doesn't really play very well. So you could make the case that yes, we're going to be affected by transparency, and now brokers are going to start acting more and more in this way. And I compare us to potentially travel agents and how that worked.
Yeah.
And it could be that you could say, yeah, we're going to go that way because technology pulls that way. And I could say, well, that's true, Mark. It could be that the people are coming in, they take one look at your business plan and they immediately say they want to do it in a different way,
Right.
Or the training that you got. So it could be that the young people will force the change because the old way is not that great. The second thing that you see happening is that there is so much investment now by the capital players and the large brokers into venture capital in our industry where they're trying to create this technology. And so I make the point in the book as an example that Colliers, your firm, sponsors this prop tech beauty pageant, and 800 young people get the opportunity to present an idea. And then if 30 of them get picked and they are nurtured with love and mentorship and money as they create apps, and then somebody wins and then JLL buys it. And so it's pretty interesting, which is that somebody could a smart young person could walk right up to our front door and go, that is really, really interesting. Thank you. No, I'm going to go over here to the side door and come at it with a completely different. If I'm gonna suffer like you did and get $300 for 3 months and live in my mother's garage, I'm going to invent an app that I can sell 3 years from now for $1 million rather than grit along like you did. If I'm going to be poor, we're going to do it under a different set of circumstances.
Yeah. Well, that's, my next bullet point is I'm 39. I've worked a lot. I'm used to it though. My dad was a CPA by trade, and like your dad, they just went to work. My challenge with the younger generation is I've hired some people, and I've been lucky with a few, and with others, it's like they, 3 days in my office and they're like, wow, this is a lot. I'm going to go home and grab my yellow pad and figure out how to create an app, like you said. And then some of them are stuck in that cycle for a long time, so I don't even know where I'm going with this, but are there going to be ways that we can bridge that gap from the old generation to the newer generation that I feel like, I wouldn't say path of least resistance because they're brilliant, right? The young people that I deal with on the technology level and what they want to do in their aspirations, it's absolutely amazing and incredible. I didn't have those choices. I kind of had to go to work. And so I don't know, is there a way that we're going to bridge that gap? Are there enough young people that are willing to put in the hard work to keep brokerage, sustainable?
Well, there's a lot of interesting territory there, Mark. You could make the case as an example that if we looked at if we looked at young people that sort of grew up in the real estate business, and if their family made it, then maybe the parents did succeed. In other words, they were able to trade assets and make money or develop property or whatever. And so they're like, wow, this is great. I love the money. I mean, I love the things that got done, and I want to exercise my creative skills, even though I'm only 22 years old. And so you could say in some ways, we might be self-selecting young people who, bright as they are, grew up relatively entitled and enabled.
Yeah, for sure.
You can't, there's a lot of people in my generation who said, oh yeah, I've been in real estate since I was 10 years old. And I go, really? And like, yeah, my dad owned 2 duplexes, and I raked the garden, and I was in the hot sun putting the new tar on the roof, and I had to stick my hand down the toilet. And, they say things.
I remember spraying popcorn ceiling and scraping it. So you're describing me.
Exactly. And but that doesn't, people who grew up under that scenario frequently say, well, then I do want to be a CPA or a doctor or something where I have more leverage on my output, on my input. If I do these things, then I will be, I have a profession in front of me. Whereas so all I'm simply saying is we might be self-selecting into the more entitled half of the pool. And that's not a criticism. But it's just different, in other words, our children, I live in Central Florida. I've been exposed to Tiger Woods, and Tiger Woods grows up, his dad's in the Green Beret, and he learns to play golf with one club. Tiger Woods plays public golf courses with one club. Now Tiger Woods' children live on a 170-foot yacht.
Right.
So you can't expect them to have the same approach to life that Tiger did, and it's not a criticism, it's just an observation. I think, of course, you go to all these presentations like, the differences between the boomers and Gen X and Gen Y, and that's been interesting to watch. What you and I both know is that there are a set of fundamental characteristics, aptitudes that the most successful people have. And so it means that maybe there aren't quite as many people, but you can still find the people that have the aptitude and the attributes that you need to succeed.
No question. And I'm like you said, by no means am I talking down to people in that situation. I am 100% jealous. I would love to be on a 150-foot yacht right now.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, my DNA though is I love change. I mean, reading your book was amazing. It's particularly in the timing of COVID, because one of the first articles I read was all about March 2021. We're going to see COVID millionaires and billionaires, people that have that tech mindset, have the time and mental capacity, which you and I may or may not have, to sit there and say, it'd be amazing. It would scale and provide a ton of value to a bigger market. So I've attempted to think through a lot of those things, and have had some fun discussions with some of the younger tech generation that is going to absolutely disrupt our industry. And it's been fun. But I do feel like COVID has re-energized me as a broker. The last few years have been really competitive. Everybody's in real estate. What have I been saying? Deliverability or execution has not been a part of the discussion the last few years, because everybody had money, everybody could have debt. But now reputation matters. And I'm not really competing when I call my clients, we put deals together, versus going to market or strategizing, or I'm also talking to these 5 other brokers type thing. So I'm personally really excited about what COVID has provided. I wish people were not getting sick and dying. And in a lot of ways, I'm grateful that the government has stepped in to sort of shore up the downside, and we'll figure this thing out. But from a brokerage standpoint, we've heard for decades, you make money when markets get going up, and you make money when the market's going down. And we've kind of been at that peak, at least in my market, last couple of years, where we just had people decide not to sell, hold long term, and we weren't seeing a lot of movement. But what are you seeing this go around versus maybe some of the previous adjustments in the markets that you've seen, like the savings and loan, the tech pop of late 90s, which I wasn't a part of? And then, what challenges do you see and what opportunities do you see from this change?
Yeah, as we talked about, first of all, we knew that some form of downturn was coming. I mean, we just, historically, the cycles have been about 7 years. Chris Lee writes a very interesting newsletter about the way these cycles work, and it's pretty proven that there's sort of a sine curve to these things, up, down, up, down. So first of all, we knew something was coming. In terms of this particular one, I would say that because it's global, it's actually been more fair. And I know that sounds kind of harsh, but it's affected everybody equally. My day job is coaching top brokers. And so that's all I hang out with is, the top performers, the top teams. And what they're telling me, which is not new, is that this is great. It gives us a chance to kind of pause and, clean out the garage and sharpen the saw. And what the very best brokers will tell you is I have never failed to increase my market share as we come out.
Awesome.
Because what happens is you lose the weakest players. They just can't make it, But by the way, I was talking to my son about this the other day. And I said, when I got in the business, it was just common knowledge that you had to have a year's worth of savings, a year's worth of operating expenses, because the business is so stinking risky. And it had nothing to do with recessions or terrorism. We didn't know about that stuff.
Right.
We just knew that deals fall apart. You can do everything right and the deal falls apart. It's just the way this baby bounces. Now, fortunately, if it goes your way, you can make $100,000 as a very young person, and so you have to understand the risk reward curve. So my son has not been, at 29 years old, has been not immune, but he always knew that this was a risky business, and he has saved his money like a demon, and he's going to be fine. And because of that, there's going to be less competitors. Even at 29, he's about to learn that as this thing moves on and we mend, that he's going to increase his market share. So the best brokers increase their market share. Number one. Number two, I think that in some ways, this is so remarkable because you go back to February and we're at all-time low unemployment, and 2 months later we're at all-time high employment. So talk about drastic. But the other thing that makes this very interesting is, so Mark, what happens when there are 3 million vaccines? And we will be there. In other words, this is it's the most abrupt, but it's also the most containable, because the solution is crystal clear.
Yeah.
When you talk to really old folks and they're like, man, we didn't know if the Nazis were going to win. And there was no way of knowing whether we were going to be a communist country. Remember that? I mean, you have to kind of think about that. And then when 9/11 happened, we're all like, oh my gosh, are we all going to buy guns and stay in our house now? And we can't trust anybody. But this is a situation that we're going to have a solution. And so it's in some ways, I think for the best brokers, and I can tell that you're starting to experience this, which is, oh my gosh, this is phenomenal. We've had this incredible run. We developed a lot of business. We made a lot of money. Hopefully we held on to that money. And this is that really great, as Stephen Covey would say, quadrant 2 time. If you read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the 4 quadrants, quadrant 2 is important but not urgent. So here's your chance to clean up your database. Here's your chance to develop new skills. And it's so fantastic because the whole world is muted. Sometimes when I'm interviewing candidates, or if you ask me to help you hire somebody, one of the questions I like to ask is, so Jennifer, if I could stop the world for a week, you wouldn't fall behind, but you could use that week to learn anything you would like. It can be cooking, it can be Italian, it can be how to use Excel, it can be how to become a Salesforce genius. What would you spend that time on? And it's a fun rhetorical question, because they go, well, when you put it like that, I've always wanted to learn how to fly a hot air balloon. Oh, really? Why is that? What would you learn from that? And it's a fun little moment while we talk about how they would expand their brain. But here's the magic. It's like, you could do it now because you really have this. So I would tell you that the most productive, the top performing brokers have looked at this as an unbeatable period of quadrant 2, or to maybe say it as one of my clients did is, I hate the pain, but I love the silver lining.
Yeah. And there are a lot of COVID silver linings, no question. So one of my favorite quotes that you had in your in Adapt was, now I got to find it so I don't misquote here. Now I don't even know where I wrote it. But it's we overestimate the amount of change that will occur in 1 year, and we underestimate the change that will occur in 5 years. With COVID accelerating change, the next 5 years are going to be crazy. That's my opinion. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I obviously didn't say that. Many people have been saying that for years. Bill Gates is, I mean, if you Googled that quote, you'd find it attributed to many people.
I know, but I pulled it from your book. That's what I'm
Yep.
saying.
So, you know, it's kind of funny because you say we overestimate the amount of change in 1 year, meaning that we see something and we're like, oh my gosh, that's fantastic. And you know, you could make the case that there might be something like, well, we always will wear masks from now on. So then you decide, I'm going to go invest in a mask making company,
Right.
or I'm going to buy all the cotton in the world and sell masks or whatever, which causes us to overestimate the amount of change. But then long run, we underestimate the amount of change. And so the idea there is that we just really struggle to perceive sort of big picture what's happening here. One of the things that has been really remarkable that I constantly think about is in Central Florida, of course, we're close to the space industry. And I had an opportunity to read the Elon Musk biography. And in that biography, it tells the story of him going to NASA and talking to this group. I forget exactly what the acronym is. It's something like SLA, and it's like Space Launch Associates or something. And it's the combination of like NASA and Lockheed and somebody, you know, one of the other big rocket companies. And he goes and meets with them and says, yeah, well, I'm going to get into the space business. We're going to put people on Mars. We're going to probably live on Mars. And they're like snickering. And he says, the only way we can do this is if we speed up the number of flights that we have, because we have so much to learn. And we need more iterations in order to learn what we need to learn. We can't do this once a year. And so they said, well, you know, at top speed, we could maybe do a launch every 6 months. And he looked at him and goes, we're going to do a launch every 6 weeks. And they laughed at that. And he said, yeah, I'm going to actually recover the spacecraft so that I can use it again and again and again. And
wow.
So there's a video that I recommend all the time to people. I wish I had it tagged, but basically what it is that it shows the rocket piece coming back to Earth. And it's kind of like a Google Earth video. You know, it starts out, here's the planet, and then here's the ocean, and then you see the barge, and then you see the yellow X. Well, the thing comes down, yellow X, fireball. Next one, yellow X, fireball. You see the next one, yellow X, and then it tilts slightly, and you see the yellow X, and then you see the horizon, then you see fireball. The fourth one, it comes yellow X, black, meaning that he did it. He landed the stinking rocket on a barge in the sea. And right then you sort of go, I think I just felt the earth move, because when you bring that into play, he could be right. We could do 6 launches. We could do a launch every 6 weeks. And so I only grasp onto that because it was so visual for me, so visceral for me. I practically cried when you see that ship kind of do it. And it reminds me of how much can change, that the best in the business said, it cannot be done. And here we are.
Well, and I mean, that's an amazing, I need to go find that video. That is amazing. I have a really good friend of mine who's a motivational speaker, among other things. And he had a video a couple of weeks ago, and he said, here I am having the best month I've ever had in my business. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do next month? And then there's Elon Musk that's like, I'm going to colonize Mars.
Right.
And it blew my mind. I'm a successful business person, not thinking big enough. And I think that is one thing I do respect and love about the younger generation, as I feel like I've beat up on them. They think big and they will deliver, man. And there's going to be epic change in the markets as we proceed, and disruptions in our business. And I welcome that. I think
Yeah. I mean, the challenge we have now is, like, you can't really argue that he won't do it. I mean, now there's so many cards on the table now that you're like, I just hope the guy lives long enough. I just want to, you know, send you know, Elon Musk some like vitamin C pills, like, dude, you know, take care of yourself here. Because he's really changed that perspective. And I think I think, in our industry, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised that it operates almost completely differently than it does now. In other words, the forces at play are so powerful and so significant. I'm talking about inside the arena, that it won't be surprising to me that, like I'm saying, well, in the future, maybe people will, buy some services on Upwork, or maybe Amazon will get a little farther into the real estate business, or maybe Pricewaterhouse will buy CBRE. I opine on all these other things, but but that's still kind of like, but in the context of there'll still be guys like Mark who get exclusive listings and sell things and earn fees. But there's a possibility that it could be totally different.
I agree. Another call would be, I would love to opine with you, right? Because to me, that is the future. Your book is the future. Adapting is the future. Thinking big is the future. The tokenization of real estate to me is the most incredible idea, and it will happen. It's happening now. You will get rid of me somehow. I will find something else to do because it's just my DNA. But there are some, like you said, there are some things that are going to happen, and I'm excited for them. I want to be on the forefront. So that's my last question to you: is what's your next book?
Well, I just have to comment on before I answer that question, I just have to say, there's people that are my age that are literally asking for just a few more years. In other words, they don't doubt that things will change radically. They just want it to stay the same, meaning that they know how to operate in the world. Just give me a couple more years. Just give me a couple more years, which is kind of interesting because what they're saying is, I totally agree it's going to change. I'm not sure I have the firepower for it. So I'm going to sneak out the side door, which what that's going to do is it's going to be like hyper speed change because there won't be any resistance anymore. In other words, people will go, no, they'll be gone. So look for change to occur. There's a couple things on my mind for the next book. I have been giving a lot of thought to the emotional resilience question. The books that I've written are very sort of time-tested, proven techniques. If you read Thrive, it's pretty clear-cut. This is, here's my remedy. I feel confident giving to you because I know if you do it this way, it will work. Or if you play off of this theme, it will work. And Adapt, I did research. I think these things can happen. But there's some facts in there. In other words, this is here's the status of Amazon. Here's the status of CB. Here's the status of 10X. So I have been thinking a lot about emotional resilience and I'm about that attribute, that element of what makes this thing work. The other thing that I've been thinking a lot about is what I've been calling the dashboard concept. But imagine, Mark, that you identified the 3 or 4 most important activities that makes your world work, and you could walk in and glance at a dashboard and see instantly where you are. Let me give you a very quick anecdote. We're both pilots. We're flying across the ocean. I'm the pilot and you're the co-pilot, and I'm flying and you're napping because it's a 13-hour flight. So I wake you up and I say, Mark, time for you to wake up. As you know, we set the bell, so it's time for me to sleep and you to wake up. But before I nap, do you have any questions? And you say, as the co-pilot, give me a second. And so together we sit there and we look at the dashboard and you say, well, let's see, we're at 36,000 feet. We've still got 600 gallons of fuel. We're going 450 miles an hour ground speed. We have winds against us of 20 miles an hour. We're heading 170 degrees west. And so you end up saying, looks like we're good. Have a nice nap. So what you've done is you've taken charge of a multi-million-dollar aircraft with 350 people on it in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because you've been able to read these key indicators. So I continue to think about what it would look like, or could a dashboard be created? There's some work to do there, but there's some technology that's coming out of that too. There's some technology that is enabling that. So that's what's on my brain these days.
Well, I love it. You have my brain going nuts because my pipeline's my lifeline. And so we track KPIs, and I've always said the visualization of data is porn for adults, which is an awful thing to say, but we have a company called Domo here in Utah, and people said that they wouldn't succeed. And I said, it's genius. All they're doing is creating a dashboard for decision makers, and making it real time. So you're onto something. I cannot wait. Super grateful for your time today. I mean, what's incredible about this conversation is, one, it's selfish. I do this so I can talk to guys like you. But the nuggets that came out for brokers is going to be really important here. I've taken massive notes, and you've delivered a ton of value, so I appreciate it. How can people best reach you? How can they buy your book? How do we give back to Blaine Strickland for giving to us?
Well, thank you. I have only one phone number. So when you find me on LinkedIn, or you find me at my website, which is www.hbs, those are my initials, hbs-resources.com. If you go to that website, there's 6 or 7 videos that are posted there for free. So if you like some of the things that I've been talking about, you can see me talk about them in these recorded webinars for 40 minutes kind of thing. There's an assessment there. If you think that you need coaching or might be interested in what a coach could do for you, there's an assessment, and you rate yourself. So you could check that out as well. You can buy the books through the website if that's interesting to you. You can also buy them from Amazon. They're easy to find. It's funny though, if you type in Thrive, you'll get about 600 matches, including some really sexy mascara. So you're going to have to type in Thrive Blaine Strickland in order to get all the way to the book. And unless, of course, you want the mascara.
Yeah, you can do both.
Yeah. I haven't talked to them about packaging those two things yet, but I'm pretty easy to find. I'm on LinkedIn as well. I have probably 3,500 LinkedIn connections. That's how you and I first connected. It's a good thing to connect to me or you, because what happens is we kind of run in the same circles, and so we generate a lot of sparks off the things that we talk about. So if you kind of like this idea, these topics, and you link to me and you or whatever, you're going to end up bumping into a lot of people that want to comment around the things that we post. So I'm easy to find. Website is probably the easiest. There's lots of information there.
Well, I look forward to exploring the website, and certainly look forward to staying in touch with you. I think you've done a fantastic job for our industry. I was just trying to think if there's one last thing I wanted to say to you other than thank you, but I look forward to staying in touch, look forward to your future books. I look forward to reading Thrive. I was going to tell you that we are in the process of continuing to grow our team, and I would like to use you to hire. So we can talk about that.
Well, you know what? There's a webinar on how to hire effectively. That's a chapter. There's 2 chapters on hiring in Thrive, and you can go watch the webinar for 40 minutes and make an even better decision whether I can help you there.
Well, we're going to do it. So thank you very much, Blaine. I really appreciate your time. Have a super productive day. I'm sure there's a million things we left off. Like, I really wanted to say corporate versus boutique on the real estate brokerage side, but we'll do that another time.
Yep. I would be happy. I would enjoy that. And, even if we don't record it, I would enjoy that. So I look forward to catching up with you again.
That sounds awesome. Thank you so much, Blaine.
Okay.